welcome everyone to the 30-minute Midas Touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas Touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. And with me, as always, is my co-host, your mama's favorite podcaster, Mark Tipton.
Well, shout out to Mama. I do. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the names each week and exactly what it's going to be, and ultimately how it's going to relate to the subject of that week. And this week, being Mama's favorite podcaster, I suppose, or however you want to say it, is because this week we're going to discuss the idea that being family friendly in professional wrestling. Is it the best? Is it a great idea? Is it something that some involved with pro wrestling kind of want to move away from? And we're going to discuss our point of view on that. And on that point, I guess the place to start would be is where do you stand on this?
Yeah, where I stand on this is obviously it's one of those things we talk about. We talk about this every week. My thought process has changed over the course of my career, the course of my life, things like that. Today, as an almost 40-year-old husband, father of two, wrestler, promoter, historian, that kind of thing, my belief is that family-friendly professional wrestling is the absolute broadest way to expand professional wrestling. And the fact that there's a lot of, cases where people have wanted to do these very edgy and things, and what that really does is it really narrows our audience and creates more of a niche. And I've always said before, wrestling is niche anyway. It's the biggest niche, because very few niches like we have sold out Madison Square Garden, right? But it's still niche, right? It's not as big as music. It's not as big as movies. It's not as big as that kind of thing, right? So, wrestling's always going to be like a little niche thing anyway. So when we start messing with the formula that made us successful for, a century?
Absolutely.
Then I think that's where we start going wrong in professional wrestling.
All right. I guess, the first way I want to attack this, if we could, is let's go at it. It oftentimes gets portrayed as a kind of a morality issue. And I want to say that because I would say yes. And let me say this and see if you agree with this. Because ultimately, whenever you're performing in front of the public and part of the audience, when you do something that is not family friendly, we'll just speak in general terms. When you do those sorts of things, there is going to be a segment of that audience that you are rejecting. Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't know everyone's personal beliefs and things like that. We talked about the Raven and the crucifixion and all that kind of stuff on our religion episode. And stuff like that, you don't know how many Catholics were in the building that night that, found that horribly offensive. You know what I mean? You just don't know about that certain thing. And that's why it's always my friend, if it's something you wouldn't say in school or church, why say it? You know what I mean? We've encountered a lot of things over the years, obviously, that have pushed the envelope and done that kind of thing. And obviously Joey Ryan with the dick flip, Priscilla Kelly with the bloody tampon spot, things like that. People think, they're so. Oh, look at them; they got millions of views on here. And what that is, though, those millions of views are non-wrestling fans sharing it with other non-wrestling fans, going, "Hey, look how stupid this shit is!"
Right, and mocking it,
and making a joke out of it. And the problem with that is, the more popular it gets, we all get painted with that same brush. So I personally, as a promoter, I've went around town trying to get sponsors, and we have quite a few, but people have actually brought up to me the Joey Ryan stuff. You know what I mean? Because is that what you do? Is that the kind? No, not at all. We're completely family. We're like it's like 1985 with us. You know what I mean? But like a lot of people, that's just what their view of not just professional wrestling, but independent professional wrestling too. Like they think it's so low budget.
Right, and outlaw, so to speak.
Outlaw, low budget, mud show.
All those phrases.
All those phrases, yeah. So that becomes your responsibility as a company is to try to, exceed those expectations and show people, hey, this is fun for the whole family and stuff like that. We at Pro Wrestling Mid-South, we actually even do wrestling birthday parties for kids, and that's a huge thing for us. You know what I mean? And there's lots of people that they're just coming to a kid's birthday party. They don't know anything about wrestling, but once they leave, they go, "Man, that was really cool," And then you guys really put on a good show, and blah blah blah. So I mean, it ends up helping everybody all the way around.
All right, and if I could, I would kind of like to approach it away from the morality issue, and it kind of gets into that seems to muddy the waters and confuse people on this. The way I look at it, and why I really share the point of view that you've expressed about family friendly being the best way to go. Let me put it this way, and I want to come at it in business terms. When you look at the movie industry, traditionally, the people who produce the movies have worked very hard for movies that they believe to be blockbuster potential or a wide, something other than, say, a horror film is going to be R-rated, but a horror film is directed at a segment of the population, not the population at large. But if you have a blockbuster, an Avengers, etc., that kind of large-scale movie, you always try to craft your movie to get at least a PG or PG-13 or something of that nature. You want to get the largest potential audience to see your film. And I think that's the kind of the viewpoint we should come at for professional wrestling or any other entertainment. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing, too. And this is something I tell people all across town. Like, listen, we want to project a good image for the kids, and we want kids to become wrestling fans, because if you become a wrestling fan when you're 5 years old, you might be a wrestling fan for the rest of your life. And we've just created a customer for the rest of our lives. Like you and I both have been lifelong wrestling fans because, at a very young age, we had that connection, right? I tell people all the time, there's not many 40-year-olds that wake up one day and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to love professional wrestling today. Unless they have a kid that loves professional wrestling. You understand? So not only do you get the kid, but then you get the parent too. You understand? So you're 2 for 1 if you want to go that route. So yeah, from a business standpoint, it's always better to try to broaden their perspective. And like I tell everybody, our shows, you can bring your 7-year-old daughter or your 7-year-old grandmother. You know what I mean? And you're going to be just fine. You're not going to hear anything that's going to bother you, I don't think. I mean, obviously there's violence involved because it's professional wrestling, but we don't do anything grotesque or anything, too extreme.
All right. Well, I may circle back to some of that terminology you just used, but I do want to say that, and I'm sure I've said this at some point before, throughout my time of watching professional wrestling, that the 2 most frequently repeated words to me were next week. And what that means to me is that it's about thinking long term. Now, what you mentioned about some of the more infamous things that have happened that were not family friendly, but did get a big response at the time, is those things, in my opinion, don't draw a long-term audience. And that's what I want everyone to think about. I mentioned I saw Eric Bischoff was on the most recent episode of AEW, and he was announced as the host of 83 Weeks podcast, which makes me cringe every time I hear it, because in the end he lost. He had a great 83 weeks, but shortly thereafter he was working for Vince McMahon, and so he won the battle but lost the war. And professional wrestling is a long-term business. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I tell everybody this is a marathon, not a sprint. You know what I mean? I've been around for 21 years now, and I've legitimately outlasted 3 or 4 generations of up and coming wrestlers that have just, they wrestle for a couple years and can't take it, or for whatever reason get out of the business. So yeah, especially we always think long term. I think year to year. You know what I mean? Where do I want to be? For Glory Lasts Forever this year. So that's in October. So from October to October, I'm thinking about where I need to be. Also, with the long term stuff, it's like, it's continuing that storyline, but it all has to make sense in the same world too. And that's what a lot of people miss the boat on, is when they, not only are they just not thinking ahead, but some of it's not conducive with what their company is. Does that make sense? It'd be like watching Schindler's List, and all of a sudden Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels showed up as Dumb and Dumber in the middle of it and did their whole shtick in the middle of Schindler's List. Like, that doesn't fit at all. You understand? Because completely two different things. So that's what happens. A lot of times wrestling companies and wrestlers lose their identities to the company themselves. That's why, like, a lot of people that come in, I have to have them, if they're more of an edgy gimmick, I have to have them tone it down for us. You know what I mean? Like, that's great. I love it. No big deal. But here, you need to do it like this.
All right. And one last little thing, I want to approach the business approach, because professional wrestling is professional. It is a business. And that's one of the things that I think that needs to be reminded, because sometimes we get more interested in, well, this would be a great idea, or this would be an interesting match, or a good story to tell, or something. Whatever it is, that's fine, but not if it conflicts with your business interests. And you mentioned about going around and seeking sponsors. Well, sponsors are going to be hesitant to be involved with a product that is not family friendly. That's fair to say. You heard it mentioned at your level, and then we'll look at the WWE and AEW. They're both dealing with large corporations. In the WWE just made the deal with for the Peacock streaming, which is dealing with NBC Universal. Of course, the AEW's on TNT, soon to move to TBS, which is, you're dealing with Time Warner Corporation. And those are going to be, now AEW has pushed the limit a little bit, and I'm a little bit concerned about it, but they haven't gone too far yet. Well, I mean, they have improved, in my opinion. Let me say that in recent weeks. So is it fair to say that from a business point of view is something that wrestling and wrestlers should keep in mind, the appeal to sponsors?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with sponsors. Most time with sponsors too, it really just comes down to whoever, if the decision maker is a wrestling fan at all, if they have any kind of connection to wrestling at all, they think it's cool and stuff like that. But yes, being family friendly is a huge part of that. That's how I sell our company. It's, hey, we are a family professional wrestling. We're good for all ages. We do a lot for the kids. We do the birthday parties. We do all this kind of stuff. And people are a lot more open to, and the number one thing that most people say about me when they talk to me about wrestling is my passion for it. So my passion comes through when I'm talking about it. I'm not just, it's not like I'm selling something I don't believe in. You know what I mean? Or I'm just selling it to make money. I'm selling professional wrestling because I love professional wrestling. I just happen to make a living at it. You know what I mean? So that's a huge thing too. But so yeah, absolutely. You have to be, and being a part of the community too. All of my sponsors are obviously locally owned sponsors. You know what I mean? I don't have any sponsors, I don't think, off the top of my head here, I'm thinking, that are like corporate owned. Because, those things, you have to send it in, and it takes 5 weeks to get anything back, and you don't know.
There's bureaucracy.
Oh, huge red tape and bureaucracy involved with that kind of stuff. But when I can sit down with a guy that lives here in Dyersburg, and maybe I went to school with his kids, or, something, you know what I mean? And I can tell him, hey, this is what I do now for a living. I could really help your business. If you sponsor this, we have 10,000 followers on Facebook, and we have people that come every week, and you'll be on the front of the show. So, yeah, they all, that's not too bad. So, like I said, we have 25 sponsors, somewhere like that. And, in my entire career, I've never seen any company have more than 5 or 10 at the most. Like 10 would be outrageous, we would think, and here we are. We have 25. You know what I mean? So I think that really speaks volumes to what we've been able to project to the community.
All right. I think just to kind of bring the other side into this, I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate. When we discussed this, and when I thought about this subject, one of the first things that sprang to mind is I thought, well, what would be a counter argument? And the first thing I would think of was what was known as the Attitude Era. Now, this was a WWF/E thing, but it is widely regarded as one of the most financially successful periods in the history of professional wrestling, and I certainly can't deny that. You talk about the Stone Cold Steve Austin era, The Rock, D-Generation X, all the really big stars that were created during that time period, the money that was drawn, the tremendous ratings that Raw and Nitro in that time period were getting with the NWO, etc., and among other things. But that time period that came to be known as the Attitude Era was tremendous for money, ticket sales, making stars, and it was certainly a less than family-friendly product oftentimes during that time. How would you handle that?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up because it's something I want to talk about too. So the Attitude Era was lightning in a bottle. You understand? You couldn't do the Attitude Era today. You understand? That was the sign of the times. You know, the late 90s like that, Jerry Springer and all the really vulgar kind of stuff that were making its way into mainstream media and television, Howard Stern and, you know, all that kind of stuff, you know, that was all centered around that time frame, right? And what WWE did was, hey, we're going to go that right. We're going to push that envelope as far as we can fucking push it. And they did. I mean, they did outrageous things. You know what I mean? And what ultimately happened was they were hot-shotting. And for those of you who don't know what hot-shotting is, that is basically when you just do as many things as you can, as quickly as you can, to try to get the biggest reactions you can, to get the biggest return quickly. You're not thinking long-term at all. It's all very short-term thinking. So when you hot-shot, say you hot-shot for a year, you're going to end up having a downfall for a year or maybe sometimes even longer. So what happened with the Attitude Era is, yes, we hot-shotted for 2 or 3 years there, and then all of a sudden it started dying out, and they realized we need to change the game, and that's when they went to the PG era. But if you look at the Attitude Era, and you look at that time frame in WWF, they still follow the correct formula for a territory promotion. You understand? And still the core beliefs of professional wrestling. They still had good versus evil. They still had, the realism of this is a competition between two athletes. This is a spectator sport. They had a lot of that kind of stuff. And they also, they created stars from top to bottom. You understand? Like, today we could never have a pimp, a porn star, and a guy who wanted head all on the same show. Right. You know what I mean? That's impossible. But like then it worked. And each one of those guys had a segment in the show. They weren't Stone Cold Steve Austin and they weren't The Rock, but they had their own segments in the show that were entertaining for that time period.
Right. And the audience went along with it. I like the point you made about it being part of the times. And I think that is important because that's something that stuck out to me, because this wasn't a decision that WWE made and said, hey, this is how we want to present professional wrestling because we think this will be more successful. And WWE does this from time to time. They frequently reference whatever's going on in pop culture or, kind of the times. They make references to it constantly. In my opinion, and you may disagree, but the WWE and professional wrestling in general tends to reflect popular culture more than direct popular culture. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that, but also I think it's more... how can I put this? I don't think that there are some instances, obviously, where we're mimicking, the world around us. Obviously, like when Batista interrupted I can't remember. Someone won an award,
Right.
And he interrupted her. That was a play on
Kanye.
the Kanye West thing, obviously. There's been all kinds. They even had John Wayne Bobbitt on Raw with Val Venus during the choppy my pee pee.
Yes.
That was a big deal. So it's always kind of it goes hand in hand together, because here's the thing too: wrestling is a weekly product. You know what I mean? So they're able to get in on the entertainment value more than like a television show, for instance. If something happens today, it may be a month before they could record something to go on a television show, right? But with wrestling, if something happened Sunday, Monday I can put it on television. It's live, and we can do it. Same thing with us here at Pro Wrestling South. We do every Friday and every Saturday night. We do 125 events a year, and I've even done that where I don't know if you remember the movie Bird Box.
Sure.
That was on Netflix. Well, we did a Bird Box blindfold match in Ripley. You know what I mean? And a complete play off the movie, and it worked. You know what I mean? People understood, and they thought it was entertaining at the time. So I mean, yeah. I think we're, like I said, we're definitely a reflection society. I think in some ways we do direct a lot of stuff. It's just people don't realize it. You understand? Jay-Z doing the Diamond Cutter sign. There's been lots of things like that where wrestling just doesn't get enough credit for the things that they've created. And people just pillage them and then it's just wrestling. Yeah. It's just wrestling, and no one will ever know.
Yeah, no one know the difference. And and I'd like to stay on this track if we could. The way that I've thought about it that helps me understand this is when you talk about the Attitude Era, you're going to talk about Stone Cold Steve Austin. Well, the thing that comes to mind is, could Stone Cold Steve Austin, in the way he was presented, could that work in any other time period? Let's say he comes along 20 years later, or 15 years later, or whatever it is. Would that presentation work as well as it did in the 90s?
Okay, here's the thing too. Great professional wrestlers, you should be able to take them and drop them in any era in professional wrestling, and they're going to work. So Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't the first, anti-hero, kick-ass babyface. You know what I mean? Bruiser Brody, there was a ton of guys like in that mold that did a lot of the same things Stone Cold did, right? So I believe that Stone Cold would be popular in any era. Obviously, some things would have to change. In 1972, on Georgia Championship Wrestling, he couldn't come out drinking beer and saying hell yeah and all the kind of stuff he was saying. So he'd have to tone that part of it down. But still, the essence of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Texas, badass, don't trust anybody, I'm a rattlesnake, all that kind of stuff would work anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
For him.
All right. Well, the way I interpret that is Steve Austin might work in any time period, but Stone Cold not necessarily so.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's just little elements, though. You understand? As much as Steve Austin is about drinking the beer, you could probably take that away and he'd still be over.
Right.
You know what I mean? You could take away some of the cussing and it would still work because he would have to find other ways of verbiage. But I mean, it could happen.
And I will say, my recollection of that time period, as fondly as I remember it, he did change his presentation from time to time. Mm-hmm. Now, it could be as simple as going to the turnbuckles and an obscene gesture would be seen, and then later on in his career, it just became fist. That's a very subtle and minimal change, but it was a change nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was a reason he did that.
Yeah.
Kind of the counter example of this that I would point to is Daniel Bryan. Mm-hmm. I, as a fan, became really enthralled with the build-up to WrestleMania 30, the Yes Movement, etc. But even at the time, I thought, could this presentation of pro wrestling work during the Attitude Era? Now, for me, the answer was fairly obvious, but do you view it in the same way I do?
Say that last
As
part.
far as Daniel Bryan being successful in the Attitude Era, so to speak.
And that wouldn't have worked just because, and here we talked about it before. I call it the WWE conundrum, and basically what that is WWE told everybody that it was fake and phony, and this is all movies, and we did this, and basically what they just told everybody that for so long that people started believing that all the decisions made were arbitrary. You understand? Well, if so and so can be on top, well, why can't we just put this guy on top? There was no real talent involved, they didn't think, in the decision making process. So what happened was when they would pick, WWE would pick a Roman Reigns, for instance. They would pick a Roman Reigns, and this is going to be our guy. And actually, the WWE Universe had picked him originally too. But the moment that WWE picked him and said, okay, this is the guy, and people realized that, the people shit all over it. And who do they turn to when they do that? They turn to the most anti-WWE guys that they have, Daniel Bryan, CM Punk. Those are the ones they usually turn to. So to me, I don't think CM Punk or Daniel Bryan, as good as they are, would have had the runs in another era. It really was right time, right place for them.
Right, the anti-WWE guy. I like that. When you said that, the mental image that jumped to my mind was John Cena and Randy Orton promoting an upcoming match, but they had Daniel Bryan in the ring at the time for this. This segment, and the audience. Now, this was in Daniel Bryan's home area, near his hometown, so that played into it as well. But the audience absolutely ignored everything that was going on and began chanting his name so much that it disrupted the segment.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too. It's like someone should have foreseen that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's almost like they were almost spitting in the wind, thinking, "Oh, we'll send them out there and watch it. They don't want to give a shit." You know what I mean? And then it ruined the segment. You know what I mean? So, you have to think about things like you said in the long term. You know what I mean? So, putting him out there like that just damaged everybody, really.
All right. I guess one of the things the points I want to try to describe in this and how we go at this is ultimately when you do the sorts of things that we're describing, whether it be in terms of violence or even sexual content, so to speak, in the product. Ultimately, the problem, it seems, that you ultimately face is where do you draw the line? Where do you stop? In professional wrestling, you're always trying to do better than your last match or your last show or whatever it is. And ultimately, the problem you create for yourself, that's because professional wrestling is a long-term thing, is where do you draw the line?
Right. One of my buddies said that wrestling needs to be PG-13. You know what I mean? Just a little bit of edge, like you said, to get the most people possible, that kind of thing. I don't necessarily think PG-13, but, around about that sounds right. You know what I mean? I know a lot of parents that aren't going to take their kids to anything that cusses or anything that has any kind of sexual innuendos and things like that. That's why I was so upset with the original, I think it was the original pay-per-view that Cody and them did in the beginning. Here's people that are I watched them. There was kids all in that crowd, right? And then Joey Ryan comes out with all the inflatable dicks. You know what I mean? And it's like, what about the 7-year-old? What about the guy that brought his 7-year-old daughter to that show, thinking he was coming to see a wrestling show, and now there's a dozen hard dicks on the rampway. Does that make any sense in professional wrestling? And that's another. Doesn't make sense for professional wrestling. Like when I go to a movie. If I go see a mob movie, of course, I'm expecting some violence. I'm expecting someone to get whacked. You know what I mean? I go in with that expectation. But when I go to a wrestling show and when I go to a basketball game, I don't expect anything vulgar to happen at a basketball game. You know what I mean? I don't expect someone to, I don't know, go up to half court and, do something during halftime that's, vulgar and should turn everyone off. You know what I mean? There's certain levels of it. So, professional wrestling to me has always worked best in the family-friendly world. And we created the most fans with the family-friendly formula, So to me, if more wrestling companies follow that general guideline, I think they would see a huge upswing in their business.
All right. And I suppose that one of the ways to bring it about and to see where use the WWE for this, because you mentioned they went to the PG type product, and it became kind of a point of derision among some fans. But we did see a tremendous success for WWE when they did that. Now, the poster boy for this became John Cena. He became criticized heavily for this. But is it not fair to say that he was very, very successful?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, and just like the Make-A-Wish stuff alone, you know what I mean? Like, no one should really talk too badly about John Cena just because he's given so much of his time to those kids that, were sick and obviously dying and things like that. So, and then the PG era was a prime example of that. Like if it was the Attitude Era, could Stone Cold have went and done that? It wouldn't have been the same, right? But John Cena was such a white meat babyface. He was so white meat that even when he was booed out of the building, he smiled at him and, this is me. You know what I mean? Like, how beautiful is that? So, and that really changed a lot of the perception of, like we talked about, when people realized WWE was picking a guy, they tried to shit on him. Well, it didn't work with Cena. Because, like I said, too, I was at WrestleMania 31 and 32. So 31 was in California, right? And that's when he wrestled Rusev, right?
Sure.
Rusev came out, fucking huge ovation, over like a motherfucker. Came out in the tank, remember?
Right.
Fucking beautiful.
Right in the tank. How do you not
Yeah.
get a response out of that?
Yeah, it was fucking amazing. John Cena comes out, place boos him out of the San Francisco Niners arena. It was ridiculous, right? Booed him out of the building. On the finish, where John Cena won, everyone was standing, 1, 2, 3, and the place erupted. You know what I mean? So, and that's the way it always is. No matter how much they boo him at the beginning, he's always going to get him at the end. You know what I mean? And, that's what a lot of people don't realize. They don't even put that part. All they think about is him getting booed. Watch the rest of the match. You know what I mean? By the end of the match, by the end of the night, he has him.
Well, I would say even during the entrance, the most famous thing was everyone, when the audience began added words to his entrance music, John Cena sucks.
Yeah.
And we all sang along. It was still entertaining, even though we were kind of
digging at him.
Yeah, or trolling, or however you want to say it. They were getting on him, but it was kind of done with, and it was fun, and it was still entertaining. And it was something that the audience did, and so then they just went with it, and he kind of embraced it, said, hey, yeah, go ahead and do that if you want to do that. I remember him stopping at ringside with people that say, they would have T-shirts that, I hate John Cena, or Cena sucks, or whatever it is. He would stop and take pictures with those people and promote it.
Yeah, same thing with the Kurt Angle, too. I mean, but Kurt Angle was a heel, though.
Right.
And that was the thing, too. To me, that just made more sense, obviously. And he'd get pissed off about him saying, remember when he actually eventually changed his song to it didn't have that same beat, so they couldn't do it anymore? I thought that was pretty ingenious myself. But, yeah, I mean, stuff like that is always kind of, it's odd. And that's what we talk about when a lot of people think that I don't want professional wrestling to evolve, and it's never been what that is. It's just I want the core beliefs of professional wrestling to live on, because like I said, the further we get away from this, the harder it is to get back. You understand? And we're seeing a lot of that now. We try to get as close to 1985 as we can, and there's still some instances where people go, I don't know, okay, watch, you know what I mean? You've seen it. We've had people call ambulances to the building. We've had just an array of things that are just in 2021 shouldn't be possible in professional wrestling with everything known and said. But for some reason, we're still able to accomplish it. And I think that's because we protect the product like we do.
All right. Because ultimately, what you're trying to do as an entertainer, which is really what professional wrestling is, it is a form of entertainment. You're trying to make a connection with the largest audience possible.
Yeah.
And the point of view is that doing it this way does that.
Yeah, and honestly, this is the whole reason we have this company here, because when there was 8 years that I did not wrestle in this area. I did not wrestle in Dyersburg for 8 years, and I lived here. And I would tell people I was a professional wrestler, and they would turn their nose up at me and, oh, really? You do that, that
thing.
that hillbilly redneck, trailer park kind of fucking thing. That's kind of what it was. And
yeah.
there'd been so much negative attention to professional wrestling in the area because of drugs and alcohol and pedophilia and things of that nature, that it really just damaged professional wrestling altogether. So, like, when we started this company, it was, hey, let's change the perception of professional wrestling. Let's show people that, it can be this again, And I think, like I said, right now we'll be in business 7 years in October here in Dyersburg. And we are the longest running company with one owner. We had a name change, but that wasn't our fault. I mean,
that was business.
That was the business thing. So we had one name change, but one owner. Pretty much the same people in charge. All that kind of stuff for 7 years. That is the longest run in this area that I ever remember and ever heard about, to be honest. So I mean. It's a point of pride for us, just come out and do old school professional wrestling and teach guys a new way. We have guys from all over the country that come in just to wrestle here because they understand that we do that old school stuff. We got a guy in right now from Arizona. We've had guys from Florida and Texas, and New York crew's going to be back next week.
All right.
Just like we have all these guys from everywhere. We've had guys from Australia and Japan and England and Canada, and, everyone's comes in, and everyone that comes in, man, they're like, I really, really like your show. I really like how you run things. I really like how you present professional wrestling. All
right. I suspect our time is probably very short.
Yeah. We are at 36 minutes. We will never be on 30 minutes.
And to be family friendly, we don't want to overstay our welcome.
True. So for myself, the golden boy, Greg Anthony, and for my co-host, your mama's favorite podcaster, Mark Tipton, thank you and goodbye.